Okay, so in this video I am going to give you some training on the reporting engine in Microsoft RMS. Right now we're in Store Operations Manager, but this training also applies to headquarters. The reporting engine works the same in both cases, just headquarters has multiple stores, but all of the concepts are the same. So to access the reports, I'm going to go to Reports, and here you can kind of see the major food groups of the different reports that we have. And there's also custom reports and memorized reports. So these groupings are pretty important. The report that we're going to look at today is a detailed sales report, and the reason why it's important to kind of keep this in mind is because the core of the detailed sales report, as an example, is sales transaction entries, meaning the individual line items sold on a transaction. So if I'm looking at a detailed sales report, while I can also potentially see information about the customers that bought that product, we have to remember that it's all about customers who bought product. So in a sales report, for example, I couldn't see information about customers that bought nothing. Likewise, with a customer report, I wouldn't be able to see sales information where no customer was assigned. Those aren't hard and fast rules, but that's a good way to think about where do I start. If I'm doing a product report, that doesn't necessarily relate to sales. It starts as a list of products, and it may contain sales information, but the basis of the report is products. The basis of these reports is sales, and in this case, detailed sales. So anytime I run one of these reports, it's going to initially show me a filter. A filter is our way to be able to ask the system to what information do I want to see. So we've already established the fact that this is individual transaction entries, and now I need to tell which of those do I want to see. So most reports have a default filter, and the default filter for detailed sales is sales that occurred today, and where a cashier's inactive equals no. Basically, I'm going to show you all the transaction entries for today, and I'm only going to show you that information for cashiers that are marked as active. You can retire a cashier record, and that's what this filter is about. But that's just the default. You can change that to whatever you want. One of the key things here that some people forget is unless the information the filter shows in this bottom list, it's not applied. And when I click on one of these, you can see it automatically chooses that. So no matter what I've selected, if I click on this one, it automatically takes me there at the top of this list. So to give an example of where I see people go wrong is they might go up here and choose date sold, and then they might change it to the 1st of October to today. But notice I changed the date, but nothing happened down here. It still says today. I need to actually click change. Now that I've done that, I can see it down at the bottom that it says 10/1 to 10/16. So we're going to come back to this idea of filters a little bit later, and I just want to get some initial data up. So I want to get quite a bit of information up here. So I'm going to bring in like a year's worth, and we'll run the report. So when the report initially runs, again, this is transaction entries. So you can see the same product gift card is listed in here a bunch of times. This is not a report detailed sales specifically. There are other reports that act different, but detailed sales is going to show me one entry per each time it was sold. And I filtered for a year's worth of data. You can see there's just a ton of information. So in its current form, this might not be useful, so what you can do is I actually can tell the system to collapse grouped rows. So by default, this report is grouped together by department. Now, a lot of people would look at this as a lot more useful. Now I can see sales broken down by department. I can actually manipulate the grouping, so instead of just being grouped by department, I could also group it by the category or the second column here. So to do that, I click on this little down arrow. You can see when I hover over it, And all the stuff up here is like this. This is kind of like my control panel for the report. I hover over it. It says select columns to group. I'm going to choose the first two columns. First one being department, second one being category. Now I can see beer, but now it's broken down by alternative. And this information on the right-hand side is a sum. So this is a sum of quantity sold and a sum of total sales. And at the top where we have beer listed here, this is a sum for all of them all together. So this report's getting a little bit more interesting. Where the power of the ability for us to get into this detail is, and the reason why a lot of people use this, is if I notice, man, I've sold a lot of kegs. That's crazy. You know, what's going on there? You can actually hit this plus, and now I can see those details. Now, once I've kind of drilled down and I can see those details, if you notice that something was spelt incorrectly, or initially when we ran the report, you could see that there were a bunch of items that were not properly placed into a department or a category. So 16 ounce of Pepsi, why does that not have a department or category? Well, you'll notice when you hover over certain fields, this little magnifying glass will appear. If I double click on the item number, I'm now in the product properties for this item. I could now assign it to whatever department or category I want. So if I wanted to put it in the NA, or a matter of fact, maybe you would want to, and you by the way, you can do multiple things at the same time, so I could keep all this open, and I could go up to database, departments, and categories, and I'm going to create a soda department right now. And then we'll click close, and now the form's still open. I'll add this to my soda department. Say OK. And now you can refresh the report. Notice nothing has happened, but I'm going to refresh the report. Soda is gone, the Pepsi is gone, excuse me, and now it actually automatically moved it into my soda department. So the sales transaction didn't change, but the grouping that this product was in did, and it's kind of all live. So a lot of people are used to a system where they click a few buttons to get a report to appear, and then they print it out. And they view reports as like this static thing. We call these reports active or living reports because they're interactive. I'm not just clicking a button and seeing some information. I can manipulate what's on the screen. I can change the way it looks. Frankly, a lot of people don't even print these reports because you can come back to this at any time you want in the future. It's always going to be there. You know, you can drill down and get to the information you want to get to. So to give a few more examples, let's look around here. I'm going to go into imported beer. This Amstel was sold for $7.99 here, but here it was sold for $5. When I worked in retail, I remember in an older system we were using, I would see something like this, and I'd be left to go run, you know, 2 other reports to try and figure out why this happened, or why was this product sold for $3.50. And you know, it takes time to do that, so a lot of times it just wouldn't happen. So on these reports, another part of this interactivity is I can right-click on the report and click Show Hide Columns. Now notice this icon here. This is actually one of the tools up on top as well, so you can access it from right-click, or from here you can do the same with the export function as well, and same with print. I'm going to click Show Hide Columns. Now you can see the columns that are displayed in this report, they're checked right now. So department, category, item, description, all that's what you see right now. But actually on a detailed sales report, and this is a common theme in all and basically all these reports, if I scroll down, you can see there's a ton more stuff in here. But if I had all of this stuff shown in this report, I wouldn't be able to make heads or tails out of it. It'd be a nightmare to look at. There'd just be too much information. So I'm going to add a few columns. I'm going to add cashier. I'm going to add discount reason code, and I'm going to add transaction. So when I do that, you can see the scroll bar appears, and now if I go to the right-hand side, you can see that the additional information was added to the transaction. And if you're using reason codes, and I strongly recommend that you do, it's configurable whether or not you use them. If you're using open discount, which most of our customers are, you can actually program the discount buttons to automatically assign a reason for the discount. You potentially can see why a cashier did it. So what's pretty neat here is if I hover over transaction number, I can once again drill down into the transaction. So from a report that started out as department sales, I can get into the receipt that happened on the day it was rung up. I can see who rung it up, the transaction number, what type of tender. I mean, this is basically a picture of the receipt. Now, another thing that's pretty neat, and one thing I experienced myself, is I would run into a kind of a suspicious situation, something that didn't look right. I shouldn't say suspicious, but I would see something wrong. I would go into the receipt and I would kind of get a sense of what happened, but what's cool is on your keyboard there's a page up and a page down button right above the arrow keys, and if I hit page up, right now you see how it says receipt 67 of 135? Well, if I hit page up, here's receipt 66 of 135, and you can see the time has gone back a little bit. Page up again, 65 of 135. So I can basically see the register tape, and I can move through it. If I hit page down, I can go to the next transaction after that. And what you'll find, what I found, is I would run into these weird situations in the reports, and I would look at the receipts that happened just prior or just after, and I'd be able to tell. I'd be able to tell that a cashier rang something up wrong and they were trying to fix their mistake and they did not a great job of it, and it would be a training opportunity. I can reprint these receipts from here. If you're on a back office computer and you print, this is going to print to your Windows printer. If you go to a till, you can print them to an actual receipt printer. But I could turn it into a training situation. If it was, hopefully not, but if it was a theft situation, and we ran into that as well, I could reprint the receipts on the register, and man, that was pretty persuasive in front of a judge to have the actual receipts. So pretty cool stuff. So this idea of drilling down, really handy. So now if I notice this guy Rick is doing some funny business, or there's a pattern of somebody needs some training, and I want to know more about what's going on with these volume discounts, you can actually take the column. So I'm going to click with my mouse, hold it down, and drag, left click, and then I am going to take discount reason code and drag it to the left. And now I'm going to get rid of department and category. Now I'm looking at what was originally a department sales report, basic but good information. I've taken the same report and now it's like a cashier audit report, which is pretty awesome. Now every time Rick gave a volume discount, I just hit this little plus key. Here's all of the individual transaction items where this took place. I can drill down into each of the receipts and see what was going on. So really powerful. I can see that a certain person gives 5 times more military discounts or competitor price matches than everybody else does, and that might cause you to scratch your head, right? Gary gave 5, Rick gave 4, Susie, who only works part-time, did it 18 times. What's up with that? So it kind of begs the question. So I took the time to make this report just the way I wanted. You resized the columns and made it look just how you want to look. That's going to be a pain to run this report again, because I'm going to want to see this once a week now. Well, that's what memorized reports are for. So when we originally looked at the drop down here, you could see memorized in the list. And you can memorize your own reports by clicking on this little disk icon here, and we can call it whatever we want. And I hit enter or click memorize, and now if I go back into reports and memorized, there's my report. If I click generate, it remembers. If I remember I put in October 1st, 2012, it remembered my date filters. So one thing you probably will have to do with memorized reports is adjust the dates every time. But if you put together columns that you want and groupings that you want and filters that you want, the memorized report will remember all that for you. One other important note about memorized reports is by default it will save those memorized reports on your computer only. So that means that anybody else who uses your computer will be and uses Store Operations Manager there will be able to have access to those. You can use security levels to stop somebody else from viewing those reports, potentially memorized reports. If you want to share them amongst a group of people, you can do that through a network share or through Dropbox, which is really popular. That's a third-party application that's free. It's pretty nice. You should talk to one of the RITE techs about that, but potentially you can set it up to share across multiple machines, which a lot of people want to be able to do. Another important thing to understand, about making these custom reports is that once you get a report the way that you want it, you can also export it. So if I click on this export button, we have the ability to export this file. Now the first option here is a destination of email. So for this to work, you need to have Outlook installed. And if you do this, it'll automatically bring up a new email window, and it'll have this file attached to it that contains the report. Another option is to choose application. So this will open a program based on the file format. So if I choose application and the file format's HTML, once I export it, I'll show you what this looks like. It automatically opened up Internet Explorer because that's the program responsible for opening up HTML files. The last option, and probably the most used, is to export it to a file. So you choose File, and then you can choose HTML, CSV, tab delimited, or XML. So the most common is CSV. So this is a file that can be opened up in Microsoft Excel. It's a comma separated file, and if you use Microsoft Excel, you can open it up. One thing that is important to note about this is if you are opening a file that contains item lookup codes with Excel, you need to be careful. If it's important that information remain intact, you'll actually have to go through the process of there's a couple of button clicks in Excel to import a file because most item lookup codes contain a leading 0. Excel actually chops that off because it says, well, if this is a number, then it shouldn't have a 0 on the front. But if you go through an import process, you can tell it to keep those leading 0s. Another thing relating to exporting is the ability to create a PDF out of this. So a lot of people, if they email a report, they don't want to create a comma separated file. These are kind of like things to open in Excel or import into other systems. But if you want to create a PDF, if you go to print it, you can print it to a normal printer, but for most of our customers, we'll also set up another type of printer called a Qt PDF printer. So outside of your normal actual printers, this Qt PDF printer, if you print to it, we'll do it once. It'll prompt me here in a moment to save this as a PDF, so I can name it whatever I want. And I'll save it to my desktop. And now this is a really nice report to send via email to somebody. So here's a PDF, and you could send that in an email, and it looks exactly the same way it looked on the screen. Okay, so last piece of the puzzle here is filters. So originally we had looked at the filters, and now you don't have to exit out of the report and re-enter to modify a filter. If you just click this button here, it'll bring the filter back up, and you can adjust it on the fly. Filters can be very simple. You know, for example, show me sales between these two dates, or you can also make them quite complex. For example, if I want to show only products that contain a description, where the description contains red. So I clicked on description, click on whatever you want to filter on, and anything that's visible in the report is also filterable. Click on description, and then this operator up here, we have options like equals, not equals, greater than, less than, contains, etc. So you have to be a little mathematical to understand what these mean. A few important notes. Equals means equals, exactly. So if I say equals red, it's going to find products with a description that contains red exactly, nothing more, nothing less. So equals means exactly, precisely equals. The only kind of bend to that rule is capitalization. If I type in red in capitals, it will still find lowercase things that have a description that equals red. With something like description, contains almost certainly should be used instead. So contains means it will find RED in the description anywhere, and we'll add that. Notice I clicked add, and now it's at the bottom of this list. Now I know it's going to be a part of this filter. I can click on any one of these, and I can click remove, and now it's out of this filter. And we'll say okay, and we'll see what we get. All right, so contains anything like refund, RE. So that's an example of kind of text filtering. A better example would be something like show me anything with a sold price less than or equal to 0. I mean, this is a good example of things where you could find suspicious activity. So if I click OK to this, here you can see keg refunds are negative. Well, those things you probably want to pay a little bit more attention to, or a coupon that you might have set up in the system. Or here we go, Labatt's Blue was sold for $0 in a quantity of 3. What the heck's going on here? There's that Rick guy again, creating problems. Sold a service fee for $4 and Labatt's Blue for $3, and volume discount was the reason code. That's pretty odd. Or you could say, show me anything with a quantity sold less than 0. So these are some examples of pretty useful filters that I've come across over time. You know, this is a return. In this system, if it has a quantity sold of negative, it's a return. So again, pretty useful to see those sorts of things. But potentially, you know, you could filter for items with a profit margin that was less than a certain amount. You could say, show me all wine that was sold with a profit margin of less than 10%. This is actually a good example of, you have to remember what kind of data you're looking at. If you filter here for profit margin less than 0, it's going to be based on products sold already. It will not show you items in your system that have a profit margin of less than 10% that were not sold between this period of time. You know, if there's a wine on the shelf right now that you're selling at 10% off, but it hasn't been sold yet, you won't find it in this report. But that would be a good place to use a price list report, because that's a list of items regardless of whether or not they've sold. So lots of filter options here. My strongest recommendation is to play around with the filters. You can have infinite combinations of them, And one of the important and beautiful things here is you can't mess this up. I mean, you can put in a filter that doesn't give you the results like when I did it with red, but you can't break anything in here, right? You can use this all day long, twist it and turn it and kind of play with it and figure out you won't hurt anything. So that's our introduction to reporting. I hope it's been helpful. Thanks.